Are you ready?
At first glance,
Whisper to her what the card is.
you might think
Okay.
this is your typical 98-year-old.
Watch me closely.
But June Fremont
Here's to those who love me well, those who don't, tough.
is anything but typical.
I was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1921. I lived on the south side. The further south you were, the tougher you were, and I lived in the last house, so be careful.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
I wanted to join something. My father was in World War I. He was in the Navy. From the time, I don't know when, I was very patriotic. I love my country. That's what prompted me to even go in the service. And I heard that the Marine Corps was the hardest to get into. So I thought, well, I'll try that. We will fight our country battle on the land and on the sea.
June entered the Marine Corps along with 23,000 other women in 1943 and started boot camp in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune.
I had a drill sergeant, and I was in the middle of the platoon. We would be marching back and forth and whatever. And so he would come up to me nose to nose, and he'd say, "What's the matter, Private? Have you got two left feet?" And so he'd send me behind the barn to practice all by myself. But I'd just sit there and wait. I found out afterwards he always took one person when they were there and teased them.
The women would do the same obstacles as the men, including climbing rope ladders while carrying 50-pound packs on their backs. After boot camp, June was stationed at the Pentagon, where she wrote citations from President Roosevelt to the family members of those missing or killed in action.
We had more or less a form letter for FDR to give to him, but I tried to make it a little more personal. The boys who brought the casket usually knew the person that was in the casket. And so I would talk with them, and I'd find out, oh, he did nothing but talk about his parents from Kentucky, or he was the leader in our platoon. Oh, there was one, this was just a young Marine, and the person who was his friend told me he was a great leader, that he led the platoon through an amazing battle. He himself started crying when he told me about it. So I added that to the letters, that FDR, which was okay with him, so that it was a little more personal, that when they received his letters, it was a little more real.
More than 68,000 Marines were wounded in World War II, and almost 25,000 lost their lives. During her time at the Pentagon, June had an opportunity to meet the woman whose husband she had been writing letters for.
Along comes Eleanor Roosevelt. She came right up to me. She said, "Where are you from? What is your name? Are they feeding you all right in the Marine Corps?" We just chit-chatted. And then I said to her, "Mrs. Roosevelt, how do you like being First Lady?" And she said, "It's tough." And as she left, we shook hands. And so I do have a program that I give here and there. And so I always tell them, this is the hand that shook hands with Eleanor Roosevelt. So if you touch me, you've touched Eleanor, because I haven't washed this hand in 75 years.
June has a long list of famous people she has encountered, including Perry Como, Harry Truman, and she even spent time with old Blue Eyes himself.
I danced with Frank Sinatra, who was just a skinny kid, but he was very nice.
In 1945, June was sent overseas to Hawaii.
They took a contingent of us Marine girls and sent us to Hawaii because the boys down there were due to go home, but they couldn't get home. They got as far as Hawaii and were doing the jobs there. So we went in and took over their jobs.
When the women arrive, 4 of them, including June, were taken for a publicity photo shoot. Wearing grass skirts, holding coconuts, and using outrigger canoes, the Marines hoped this would help recruit more women.
When I was in Hawaii, I also drove for our commandant. And so we'd be going along, and he'd say, "Corporal, you have a heavy foot." So I'd have to slow down. And I'd say, "I'm from Chicago, we drive fast."
Her work in the military would also lead to June meeting her husband.
He was in charge of the soldiers that would be going overseas to battle. They would send a bus to the Marine girls. We would go play cards with them or just chit-chat with them or listen to them. It was just before they were leaving. We walked in, Lee, he took a hold of my arm and he said, "Today's my birthday." He says, "My mother sent me a cake. You come on into my office and have a piece." So I did. He just wouldn't let me alone. A week later, I was practicing dancing with a sailor. We were going to go into a dance contest. And all of a sudden, over the PA system, they yelled, "June Schwark, Leo Fremont is here." I said, "Oh, let him in the gate." So they let him in, and I parked him over where he had a table where he could have a Coke or something. Now, we lived in our compound had a big hill like that. So I'd say, "I'll be right back." So I'd go around the big hill, and I'd go with the sailor and practice a little bit. And I'd say, "I'll be right back." So I'd go back over the hill, and I'd sit and talk with Leah a little bit. After the 3rd time, he said, "There's a big thing going on at the Fairview Hotel in Washington. Either you go or you don't." So I said, "I'll go just a minute." So I went back over the hill, told my friend, "Tell the sailor I'm sick." We married. I had 6 children, 13 grandchildren, and 32 great-grandchildren.
June's legacy runs even farther as she continues to speak publicly about her service.
Telling you to shake hands with a 98-year-old Marine. Can you imagine how old I am? My mother died at 105, could still play bridge, still could crochet. So I guess it's longevity in my family. I love life. I mean, it's been a great adventure. First to fight for right and freedom and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to the title of United States Marine.